go across to Manisha now, who joins in for all things commodities. Manisha.
Well, thank you so much for that, Manglam. And I'm looking at sugar right now because we've seen very, very volatile moves in the international markets. For the Indian markets as well, it all has been about policies. Will they get better after July are some of the questions that the sector seems to be asking. But let's get in Dev Gill. He's agricultural options broker at Marex, and he joins us on the show now. Dev, hi, thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, to the global prices, the raw sugar has been volatile. We've almost done 25 and 26 and trading below 19 right now. How have you seen this move in the last 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been exceptionally volatile in the global markets and confounded, to be honest, most of the expectation on price. We've seen speculators rather sort of flip from being net long, being net short, and being happy to add to their shorts. And this is really what is sort of driving the market lower day by day, and it keeps going. As you said, yesterday we printed sub 19 cents. So yeah, the pressure's on sugar right now.
It is. How are you also, Dave, looking at Brazil with the kind of numbers that they're throwing in? I mean, we do realize that, yes, the crude oil prices are way off the kind of highs that people talked about, or even the numbers that we saw in the beginning of this year. So there is no more sugar production from Brazil than ethanol. So with the kind of sugar production that Brazil really seems to be putting on, which perhaps is the second on record, what's your sense on the numbers going forward?
Sure. I think one thing that's unfortunate about sugar right now is the correlation with oil has been sort of disbanded for now. So oil prices obviously, okay, slightly off the highs, but notwithstanding, the sugar price and the oil price have sort of moved in opposing fashion. So we haven't really had any solace in oil prices. And as you say, the Brazilian crop is going to supply, or is expected to supply, around 80% of the export market. Brazil is due to be large. We had one of the largest meetings and focus points in New York last week, and the consensus really was that whilst Brazil is continuing to sort of feed the sugar requirements, and there is very robust demand, especially in the Far East, that prices can comfortably stay around here, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of numbers, we're looking at 600 million tons of cane, 41.6 million tons of sugar. But, you know, there have been some much bigger estimates in the room last week at our convention.
Oh, well, yes, Dave, I read some of them. But what's your sense on prices going forward from here? I mean, do you see 18 holding?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing really now is not necessarily a reflection of fundamentals, but we are seeing speculators, as we mentioned, flip from long to short. They're making money consistently, and what we really need is some sort of confirmation that the dry weather in Brazil today and in the past is going to impact Brazilian data, especially in terms of the crop data for yield. So the expectation is from our side that the first half of the year will continue to show fairly promising results in terms of data from Unica, which is the sort of bi-weekly Brazilian data point in the sugar market. And coming from June, July, we'll start to see those numbers fall off as the dry weather impacts. And then we could expect some sort of firmer prices and some potential short covering in the speculator market that would potentially push prices higher.
Dave, can I still push you for a number there?
Sure. I mean, in terms of what we think about the market today, we can understand why the market price is around here. Can it go lower? Some, again, in the room, the symposium, we're talking about a price of at a limit 18. And then going and sort of finding some headroom. I think one thing that's important to note is that the consumer demand all the way down has been exceptional. Import parities are open. Record prices domestically in Indonesia right now. China's been buying multiple cargoes, over 1 million tons. So the demand is there. But again, speculators are ruling the roost right now and driving prices lower in the short term. So we'll look forward to Unica, and we'll also look forward to tracking that weather as we do for our clients.
Sitting where you are right now, Dev, how are you looking at the India production, the ethanol policy and the overall policy, and the expectation that whatever we see now, perhaps in sense of exports, is one thing that is now perhaps postponed to 2025. But until then, how do you see India as a market?
Yeah, India is exceptionally important. Obviously, in terms of the dispersion of expectation, it's also important because it impacts the world markets views on what we can expect in terms of exports. We've been consistent that we don't expect exports to be for this crop year. Next crop year, still we think it's tight. Our numbers in terms of consumption much higher than the government and various associations and carry in and carry out stock. We don't, as a base case, expect large exports next year. And just to be clear, the exports we're talking about are excluding the kind of small piecemeal export quantities to places like the Maldives and neighboring countries and friends of India. We're talking about the kind of allowance for exports on a wide basis. So India next year, we're expecting around 30 million tons of sugar produced. And again, by our metric, we think it will be very tight. So the government's not going to be in any rush to export. Our view is that the government's three kind of priorities first are food for the domestic requirements, then ethanol, and then export. So if you satisfy the first two, then you might have a scenario next year where you could export, but that's a long way away. And with what's going on domestically in growth and the great news in India, consumption we expect to remain robust, and so that will be something for much closer to the time next year.
All right, Dev, thank you for that conversation. Appreciate your time. So, well, that's happening in the sugar markets internationally, where we perhaps are near the bottom right now, or 18 perhaps is a level that a lot of people would be comfortable at. But for the Indian markets, for sugar, it's going to be food and then ethanol and then perhaps exports, and that also in the second half of 2025. Until then, there perhaps is not going to be a policy change. But with that, it's a wrap on Halftime Report. Business Lunch will take all the action ahead.